I dive into our main topic of toxic masculinity, I do want to mention that, you know what, this week, President Uhuru Kenyatta has signed into law polygamy, that polygamy is now legal here in Kenya. And on top of that, there is no limitation to the number of wives that a man can now marry in this country. And so let me introduce my guest. His name is Chito Ndlovu, and he's a media personality. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Joyce.
What do you think about this news? I know a lot of men will be excited. Which side do you fall on?
Okay, let me start from a personal.
Yes.
Personally, I don't believe in polygamy, personally.
Okay.
But I think this works for both sides in the sense that the women are now protected, in the sense that you're no longer being a quote-unquote clandé, you're not the woman who's hidden. So when it comes to rights for the woman, I think it's a good thing, because now then she can be recognized. And if she's recognized by the law, that means in the event that this man passes away, you don't have the scenarios we've been having for the last decades and decades. Women pop up, you don't know how to take care of the children, or the children are not recognized because no one knew they were there, or if they are, they're not given their full rights as the child to this person. So I think it's a win-win. And also it helps you have that honest conversation.
Okay.
So if you're getting into marriage with somebody, then you have the honest conversation of, so where are we going to? But then yet, if I'm not mistaken, there's still a limitation. How you start is how you finish. In terms of, if you start in the church setup, if you get married through the church, you can't have number 2, number 3, number 4.
Yeah.
But if you get married customary setup where you just pay bride price, then you can go 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think it's how you start.
I was
So
waiting
if
for you
your
to
guy,
continue counting, I'm just like, Chito. But here's the thing, you know what? It's interesting because actually one of the people who was proposing this and is a big proponent, I think her name is Christine Ocheng, and she's the executive director of the Federation of Women Lawyers. So she's the one like really championing this. That organization is really championing this, I believe. And it's just interesting to me that you're calling it a win-win situation. And I guess in her eyes, she's saying it's the same because a lot of women now would, in their eyes, have equality or access. But it goes down to a moral fabric too at the end of the day. Because how did we even get here? Because you used a very interesting word, clandé. Meaning you were already committed in one relationship and somehow decided to step out and do other things. And now you're trying to legitimize basically your action, legitimize your whatever it is you were doing on the side. How is that okay? That now we're saying it's just not, because it's law and it's okay.
It's not okay. But I feel like we're in that space where we now have to have, I guess we can call it a quote-unquote consideration for all. Because now you see, whereas there are people who are willing to stay true to that one person, we have to also admit the fact that there are those who are not willing to. So if those find themselves in that scenario, are all parties well protected? And then, of course, there are children from there. Then if we follow Christianity, no child is an accident. So when there are those children from that side, what then happens to them in the event that daddy has gone or daddy decides he doesn't want to do anything? So I think they still, as much as we're talking about the moral fabric, there's still the side where we need to protect every single person as much as we can.
My only concern is now, you know, we're very much about equality and whatnot. I'm just waiting for someone to come and say, now even women.
I know it's going to come. I know it's coming. I know it's around the corner. Before the year ends, someone is going to propose.
For real, if a chick comes and says that she's dating you and 7 other people.
I can't. I don't share. I can't share.
So, and
I can't share and I cannot be shared.
Okay,
I feel
good.
like I need to put it on. I can't share and I cannot be shared.
Both sides. But Mazemi, I just want to know: are we waiting now to hear that women are also going to be demanding to have multiple spouses? Hey, anyway, my sentiments about this are very strong, so let me just keep quiet and move on to our next discussion. But you guys can keep sending in your feedback on that. 22999 is the SMS line. And Chito, today we want to talk about toxic masculinity, or when masculinity becomes a problem, quote unquote. So let's first begin by explaining how does masculinity become a problem? What do we even mean by toxic masculinity?
First, when you talk about toxic masculinity, I look at it in the same sentence as toxic waste. When we are when our rivers are getting toxic, I look at it in the same line.
Okay.
The river is good.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's good for the people around it.
Sure.
But when you put chemicals in it, what happens?
It gets bad.
It gets bad. So I translate that same into masculinity. Masculinity in itself is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
The same way we talk about the womanhood is amazing. Masculinity is amazing.
Yeah.
But what becomes the problem is when that masculinity is used to malign other people around, not just the women, even fellow men. Because you also have scenarios. Bullying for me is, if I was to go down to the start, bullying is what we would term as toxic masculinity, especially if it's bullying among men. When you look at that other video of the young boy who was in the primary school who just went, for me, that's an example of what then we would term as toxic masculinity. So you're putting down everybody else. It's about that individual, that man in himself, as opposed to the people around. So you're not taking care. Even for me, throwing waste is a sign of toxic masculinity.
Sure, yeah.
Because you can't just be littering around everywhere. So there's
I
different...
preach to all those people who like throwing banana peels and tissue paper out of matatu windows.
It starts from everywhere. I think it's just that when we view it as toxic is when there's a woman in a relationship with a man and she's been physically abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused, because I feel that's also something we rarely talk about.
Yeah.
That's when you want to say that's toxic. Or if there's a woman in an organization who has been stepped on by the men, then we say that's toxic. But I think it's a whole round, there are different aspects to it.
So, I mean, you're a young cultured guy. You are a media personality. You talk to a lot of people. You know, you're well-spoken. What does it mean to be a man to you? What is it? Because in many ways, it almost feels like that's convoluted now. What does it mean to be a man today?
In fact, I feel like we've seldom answered that question. From me as Chito, what it means to be a man is I look at a man, most people look at a man as head. This one I steal from Dr. Miles Monroe. Most people look at a man as head to be on the top. I look at a man as a head to be at the bottom, as a foundation, as a backbone.
Wow.
That's how I look at it. So for me, I view myself as a foundation. So when I view myself as a foundation, I look at my father as my foundation. Then I become a foundation. So he started us off. I become another foundation for now when God gives me a family. That's how I look at it.
Can all the ladies say hallelujah? Nasikia ma whispers huko kwa kona. Even my director hata haja concentrate. How much time? But no, seriously.
Yes.
I really respect that because in many ways it's also a very rare perspective. You don't hear that. You hear a lot of this assertion, and maybe that's part of where even this bill is coming from, because they're basing it on a lot of the different like cultural practices that have been in our society. But when you look at it, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying there are actual cultures in Kenya where a wife is considered like a child, right? And that's where things like even beating her, disciplining her can come into the picture. So it's very rare to hear a guy say, no, you know what, I'm looking at myself as the backbone, as the support to this thing. How do you reconcile that with all the pressures for men to be and to have and to sound and to look and this whole ego thing? How do you reconcile that?
I look at myself as a man on my own. I usually even say this to my friends. I always say, at the end of the day, when we all pass on, I answer for me. I don't answer for you. So I'm responsible for my actions, how I treated the people around me, how I spoke to them, because we also told about our words, how I spoke to them, how I spoke about them. That's how I hold myself accountable to that. Because when you talk about, for me, when I look at it, at also being a foundation, is that if you look at a home where there is a man who tells the children, tunaenda kanisa, it does not matter. Everyone follows. It doesn't matter who is awake, who is asleep. So I look at that, there's a power in that aspect. So I look at myself as if there are 5 rotten tomatoes, guess what? We are going to wash each and every single one of you. So let me be the one to give you an example of where we should go to. But I think it's also about having good people around you to help you articulate yourself even in such scenarios. I mean, the reality is there are people with ego. There are men who will be like, like I'm the type of man who I will hold my woman's back. If she has to get something, I won't feel ashamed about it. I won't feel bad about it. I'm like, it's something I want to do. You
know, you're reminding me of a time where a place I used to work, my colleagues were going out for lunch. And I asked the guy to can you just bring me back whatever? Because I was still working. I was like, mimi siwezi bebea mtu chakula. I was just like, what?
Now, see, that for me,
hawezi beba paper bag. Not as a handbag.
Yeah, that's
For you,
unaffected.
you're unaffected.
I'm unaffected by it because the definition of who I am is not what somebody else sees.
Right.
I define who I am. And I think it's important for every man to define who are you?
Yeah.
What makes you you?
How do you get to that point though? Because I think a lot of men would listen to you now and really admire that and want to do it. But there's also this pressure because anything that happens, a dude is trying to take care of himself, utasema oh ni umama. You know what I mean? Like amenda sijui kinyozi unamwona ati amechanywa nywele na nani oh ni umama.
Yeah.
Like you need to be hard and you need to be
Yeah.
rough. How does a man get to that point?
Yeah.
Because there's all this pressure.
Yeah.
Even the pressure to be a bad boy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you only have one cheek. Mazimi, I'm bowling with like
Yeah,
5.
yeah.
Like how do you overcome that?
Yeah. First of all, personally, it's also my beliefs, my personal beliefs. Number one, I'll say that I believe in God. So for me, it starts from there. So if I believe in God and I submit myself to God, submitting to these other things around me, not much of my problem.
Sure.
They were a challenge before. It's not like it's just, oh yeah. There was a point it was a challenge. You'd have different conversations. You find yourself getting influenced, not necessarily fast, but slowly. Before you know it, you're in it and you're wondering how.
Yeah.
The second thing for me, and the most important, is you have to come to a point where as a man you make a decision and you say whether I am not gonna find myself in these circles. That also means sometimes changing the people you're hanging out with. I think that's a very important part of everything. I went through a season in my life where people were just being pulled out and I couldn't understand where they were going to. You just wake up one morning or like 3 months later, you're no longer as close to as someone as you used to be before. That is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not a time for you now as a man to go, hey, Joe, you're not talking to me anymore. What happened? No. Look at your last 3 months without them. You'll find things have been different. But it's also that point of, I have made a decision. Have you made a decision to say, you know what, I will not do A, B, C, D, E.
Right.
When you make that decision, hang around people of the same nature. I usually say every man needs 3 types of friends. One, older than him, who becomes like in a relay race. He's the guy who starts you off. So you're looking at him as that's where I need to go to. Then you need a man who's your age, who you can relate to the similar issues around you.
Right.
And you need a man younger than you who you can pull through.
Right.
So I think those
So it's
three...
not just about
It's
getting,
not just
it's also
about
about
getting. It's
giving.
also about giving. So you have 3 pillars around you that you can follow. So the man ahead of you should be someone who you actually have respect for. Someone whose personal life you've seen. That helps you then when another man comes and tells you, hey, why are you wearing like that? You're new mama. You're able to be like, but hey, I know somebody
already
else
have a role model.
who's better. So if they're okay, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then you're able to help somebody else beneath you. I usually say, now imagine if 10,000 men in Kenya did that.
Come on.
We would have touched how many lives? To the power of 3? Over 300,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Fascinating discussion here with Chito. And we're going to take a short break right now, but he's going to be back after this break with me to keep your questions coming into 22999, even as we talk about masculinity, toxic masculinity, and when that becomes, or masculinity becomes a problem. 22999 is the SMS line. And you can also comment on our Facebook page at Switch TV Kenya. We'll be back in just a bit. All right, guys, welcome back to Full Circle with Joyce. And now I'm joined by another guest in addition to Chito. His name is Danish Odongo, who is a human being, okay? That's how we're introducing him today. Yeah. He's a human being who loves writing and loves YouTube.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right, and you're a human being who loves media.
Yes.
All right, and is passionate about manhood and just talking about brothers and the different issues that men face. Yes. Welcome again to the show, and Karibu Sana to you as well. We're talking about toxic masculinity here today on the show, and a very interesting discussion that I had with Chito just before the break. But Danish, as we bring you in now, one of the things that he had mentioned was how it's very important for men to be careful of their circle, who they look up to, who their peers are, but also who they are raising and who they are bringing up. And I just kind of want to get your sentiments on that. You two actually know each other and you go a ways back. As you answer that question about a man's circle, because that comes with a lot of influence, either positive or negative, reflecting on your own friendship and your own relationship, how important is that for men today? Because I think there's that pressure for for themselves, you know what I mean? And in a sense, there's no accountability is the word that I was looking for. Men don't have not many men have accountability systems around them to keep them in check?
Actually, I look at it a bit differently, that while many men have many friends around them and many brothers around them, the question is, how many genuine friends do you have around you? And you only know genuine friends when you're walking through a dry path, when you're in a difficult situation. That's when you know that people who say they're your brothers, are they truly your brothers? I recently lost a couple of friends I had because, you know, I was in a difficult situation, and the expectation was that they would be there for me. Some of them would be there for me. Of course, maybe they were there for me in ways that perhaps I didn't know, like what Chito was saying about understanding your brother and knowing them. So for me, I'm not even worried about having people around you. The question is, are they genuine people? Because many of us usually walk like we have a band of brothers around us, and we go for nyama choma, and we go for road trips, and we go for booze, and we go to clubbing and all this sort of stuff. But then when push comes to shove, that's why you find that men are 3 times more likely to die from suicide than women, that men are killing themselves at a much higher rate. They are more prone to depression, even though women are diagnosed more with depression. That if you look at 90% of road fatalities, of prison population, they are men. 70% of road fatalities are men. If you look at post-election violence, most men, succumb to that because of, quote unquote, not having a really genuine brothers who can tell you that, by the way, what you're doing now may be beneficial, but it's not. So genuine brotherhood is what I'm now craving right now, and that's what I'm actually building.
But what about genuine fatherhood too? Because a lot of the times in the West, you hear about the statistic that a lot of people who are incarcerated are black men who grew up under single mothers. Is that the same sort of reflection here?
Actually, it's a bit, so about genuine fatherhood, I think it's really important that men cultivate genuine fatherhood with their fathers or the male figures in their lives. Some of them are not privileged to have fathers. But also it takes a bit of humility, because I've also noticed in my journey, as we were talking with Chito, as I was doing my book, I noticed that some of the beef I had with my father, or the image I had of my father, was not crafted by my father. People around me crafted it. Either it was my mother or my dad's friends, because my father was always working, so I never got a chance to really know him for who he was. But then now, when I started now doing all this journey of healing and trying to find myself, that's when I discovered how mistaken I was. And then I just expanded that circle, and I tried to ask myself, how many men are out here having beef with their fathers for things that their fathers never did, but they were told by their mothers that your father did this or did not do this. So also it's about checking off all those predisposed conceptions you have about your dad, and really getting to know that your father could be 80, you're only 30. Your father could be 60, you're only 20. The lessons he's learned in life, you're going to have to humble yourself and learn, even at a point of forgiving or overlooking some of those things he did, because those lessons are very important for us to pass them to the next generation. Because if we let them die with all those knowledge they have and the generational skills that they have, then we're also going to walk into the same mistakes they made. And perhaps we're going to just repeat the cycle of mistakes.
Chito, one of the things that I guess you focus on in your media endeavors, your show and others, is finance. And yani ka kuna kitu ya kuhurumia wanaume Kenya ni finance. Wanapeangwa pressure. Hey madam. A man is about money. Mwanaume ni mfuko.
The depth of mfuko.
The depth na unono. Depth and width. Hapo ndio sasa hiyo geometry inaingia. Tunataka depth na width. And it is so much pressure. A lot of men postponing commitment because they just, feel like they can't match up to that ridiculous standard that a lot of women have put in place. Even just the pressure, again, like I was saying, to have and to own and to look like, people are living all these flashy lives. Unaenda unachukua loans for days, you know what I mean? Talk to us about finance and masculinity and how, in many ways, that could be a very serious cause of this depression as well.
It is.
It all stems from also walking back and just tying into what Danny said. You have a father image, so many men want to compete with their fathers. So your idea is, if dad had a house at this age, let me make sure I do it at a younger age, because you want to prove I'm the better version of who my dad was. So it starts there.
Which is noble.
It's noble, and it's fine, because essentially the next generation should be better than the previous. So that's okay. What for me then becomes the problem is when you now bring in, as we're talking about genuine brotherhood, you have brothers who come in. Now you have this 20-year-old whose father, who is 70, has bought him a BMW. And we uko na matatu. And then this other friend of yours is in a Vitz. So now you have already, and you're not looking at the brands of cars, you're looking at their driving. And you're already comparing yourself now to your father and your brothers. Now, this is where I feel most of the times the problem comes in. Because you don't have a genuine conversation with these friends of yours who are in a level you want to get to financially. So what you start doing now is you borrow from Peter to pay Paul so that you can go and buy this thing. And it becomes it becomes a circle there. Then while you're figuring out how to get your car, you eventually get that car. Now what is happening? You're seeing these guys are now going traveling. Now these days we're seeing everyone going to Thailand. Guys are in China. Now that becomes another pressure. Then you now find this woman who you want to date, and she also has her own expectations. But I think when it comes to finances of a man, it's important, first of all, to also pat yourself on the back. We have many guys who started working when they were 19. Not many people have the privilege of working at 19. Pat yourself on the back for that. We have guys who, when you started, your salary was 10,000. 5 years later, you're at 70,000. That's improvement. That's progress. But we seldom look at us. We look at the people next to us and compare their financial nature with ours.
Comparison is the thief of all joy.
Yes, that's where the problem, that comparing, looking at what can I, or even trying to compete. So your friend has gotten this, you want to get better. Your friend is living in this neighborhood, you want to get into the same neighborhood in a bigger house. When and you can walk your own journey.
And to quote a great man, Eliud Kipchoge, who said, he was competing against himself. You know, at the end of the day, your competition should be about becoming better than you were yesterday and not looking at the people around you. But our time is fleeting so quickly. But I want us to also touch on masculinity and women, right? We've seen a lot in this country, issues of femicide, you know, I don't know what happens, and you just see these very violent relationships, violent, even death now, between partners who were once alleged lovers. You know, when you guys see that, as men who are very passionate about brotherhood, masculinity, positive manhood, how do you guys explain that situation?
Actually, Joyce, you raise a very fundamental issue. According to the Gender and Equality Commission, they did a report in 2016 that Kenya loses about 64 billion shillings in terms of gender-based violence, both in terms of 64 billion shillings. So that is in terms of litigation costs, recovery, time wasted, and stuff like that. And so for me, my journey about masculinity, I feel like if we keep on bashing men, or toxic, or all this, all of that, we're going to address the root cause of the problem. And therefore, my address is to come a bit of evidence-based discussion. That we need to focus on mental health for men, not because we want them to be better beings, but because it's good for all humanity when men are saner, when men are in a better headspace. Because for somebody to push you, for somebody to kill, for somebody to maim, for somebody to do that, even though you want to lump all men and say all men are dogs or all men are trash, but I think it takes a bit, it needs a bit more empathy to walk in their shoes and wonder, I mean, a normal person, would they cut somebody and chop them off into small pieces and put them in a sack like it happened in Eldoret? Absolutely no. It takes a certain mental space for men to, and we're not excusing that. Then there are issues of mental health, there are issues of being, of nature, there are issues of, you know, criminal elements, people who are just criminals. And I feel like what Chito was saying, the discussion should be that men need to be encouraged to cultivate their own identity, so that you don't compare yourself to others, because it's that pressure that, oh, by the way, my wife comes home late, your wife comes home early, and therefore I'm going to be angry. We're going to compare my marriage with somebody else's marriage, instead of saying, you know what, by the way, I've married this woman, we're both unique and we're both independent. So it's a really, really sad thing, but we're going to end it if we come together. Feminists and people who are propagating for progressive masculinity, we're going to come together to solve this problem. But us versus them will not alienate us. Will alienate us. Bashing men will not help us. Calling them names and all this sort of stuff will not help us.
You're right. And not all men are bad. And I think you're right that we need to change our language. We need to stop saying all men are dogs. Just one guy hurt you. It's not everybody is like that. There are good men around. I'll take that as your final comments, Danish, but very quickly yours as well, as I do need to wrap up.
I think just tying into what Danish spoke about, it's not right. I mean, we have to agree at that point, it's not right for these things to be happening. but it's also important even for us as men to have honest conversations with one another. When we sit as brothers, I can tell a brother of mine who has a tendency for certain behavior, have an honest conversation. Bro, you have anger issues.
Yeah.
Let's deal with the anger issues.
Yeah.
Bro, you are a serial cheater.
Yeah.
Let's deal with that problem.
It's true.
Bro,
yeah.
you're an alcoholic. Because I think there's
Stop
also that
encouraging
conversation.
the behavior.
Instead of you saying, this guy is an alcoholic, pair ingine around. No,
Yeah.
let's deal with the issue. Have honest conversations.
All right.
Yes.
Hey, gentlemen, I feel like we need to carry on this conversation. Unfortunately, our time is up. So hopefully we'll have you both back another time. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you guys as well for tuning in. Joshua from Kisumu, you're saying the discussion's really inspiring you. Carol from Eldoret, I see your comments as well. David from Kutus in Nyangati, Kirinyaga County as well. Asanteni sana to all of you. Coming up next, we're going to get ready for our second hour of the day, and we're going to be focusing on health and wellness coming up soon. Stay tuned.